Stormbreaker. I like the position of the yacht within the image. The image has the appearance of being treated with HDR. The dynamic range is a little off, with the shadows and whites needing lightening. There appears to be a halo between the sky and the treetops, suggesting the sky has been overprocessed or replaced. The masts of the boat are white against the trees, but black against the sky. Not accepted. Burney's history. This is a very typical industrial site. The image appears a little flat and underexposed. I would like to see more detail in the shadow areas and a little more contrast. The image needs to be cropped top and bottom. An acceptance. Fern. The author has endeavoured to create a very different image. I like the soft background and the water drops on the front leaves, but these leaves should be pin sharp throughout their length. They are soft top and bottom. The image, I feel, is underexposed. An acceptance. Hobart Wharf. A nice image, well cropped, with nice reflections. The image is sharp, with good depth of field. The image is underexposed and flat, and all areas of white are seen as grey. An acceptance. Late afternoon, Plaza Hotel. A nice image with a good deal of potential, but the people are underexposed and the hotel overexposed. Easily fixed. Use a linear gradient starting at the bottom and move up to mid-hotel and adjust the exposure of the people. Then have a second gradient down from the top to correct the hotel. An acceptance. No footy today. This is a quite well exposed image with a good depth of field. The image is quite sharp. I find the building on the left unnecessary and distracting, as are the escalators at the bottom. I would crop these things out to at least the figures and preferably the centre of the roadway. This would make a much stronger image. An acceptance. Pergola. A nice image that has been well seen. It has good leading lines to the gardens and the lake. The depth of field is good, but it is underexposed and needs lightening around the pergola. The right-hand side is very busy and unnecessary and should be cropped. An acceptance. The boat shed. A typical boat shed, well weathered and part of a former time. The shed is underexposed and needs to have the shadows lightened and a little white added to bring out the highlights. The left-hand side of the image is basically negative space and adds very little to the story. So I'd like to see it cropped to just short of the shed roof. An acceptance. Train travel. A nice capture of the old steam locomotive. The depth of field is good and there is sharp detail throughout. The image has been underexposed and also needs the shadows highlighted. If you have an image with someone looking out a window, make sure they can be seen. An acceptance. White Line Pass Skagway. A very daunting landscape that has been well exposed and has an excellent leading line. There is good detail in the mountains and the surrounds appear to be over-sharpened. The depth of field is good. An acceptance. A quiet drink. A nice, clean, sharp image with good detail throughout. The dynamic range is excellent with detail to be seen in both the highlights and the shadows. It has been well cropped and has a good storyline. A merit. Adelaide by night. This is a pleasing image that has endeavoured to capture the magic of the buildings at night. You have excellent detail in the blacks, but there is some loss in the highlights. The image has been well cropped and tells a good story. However, the horizon is not straight, as seen by the verticals of the buildings. This can be easily corrected with a one-click in Photoshop. A merit. Down to the Gordon River. An unusual and thoughtful image that tells a good story. It has generally been well exposed, although I would like to see a little more detail in the dark areas. A merit. From times past. A nice, clean, well-focused image with a good depth of field. The image is underexposed, causing any whites to appear grey. This also leads to a loss of detail in the faces. The horizon also appears to be sloping to the left. A merit. Light music. A very nice image that has had a lot of thought go into its construction. The image, as it stands, is underexposed and a little flat. Increasing the exposure and applying a little clarity would make the image sing. A merit. Lights in the lobby. An interesting image that has been well seen by the author. The image has been well exposed with good contrast and depth of field. The dynamic range is quite good, but a lightening of the shadows would be useful. A merit. Site of human tragedy. A very different approach to this well-documented site. There is an excellent leading line with the floorboards. There is good sharp detail throughout the image. The vertical of the building is slanted and should be straightened. This can be done with a single click of the mouse in Photoshop. A merit. Bonding. A very nice image with a good story. The image is sharp and well focused with a good depth of field. The background is soft and unobtrusive. It has been well cropped. Honours. Driving the Iron Horse. A very nice image that has been well exposed with a good dynamic range. The depth of field is good and the image has been well cropped. Honours. Focus on the task. A very nice portrait that has been well exposed. The depth of field is good, as is the dynamic range. I like the hint of a spectator in the background, but I would like to see the top cropped. Honours. Pooker. An excellent portrait with good detail without being over-sharpened. The exposure is good, but it needs a little more contrast. The depth of field is good with a soft, unobtrusive background. Honours. Tilba Leather Store. A well-exposed image with a good dynamic range. The image is sharp with a good depth of field. The image has good detail, but with an exposure brush, more detail can be brought out in the entrance and below the canvas awnings. Honours. You can't catch me. What a great image. The exposure is excellent. The detail is sharp and clear, while the background is soft and muted. The dynamic range is good with detail in the whites as well as detail in the darks. The horses are well positioned in the image with room to move into. It has a very strong story. Well done. Honours. Another World. A nice colourful image that has been well focused and exposed. The use of polarising filters is fascinating, and I wonder if you have tried photographing a thin layer of ice with a polarising filter above and below. An acceptance. Autumn Bird Orchid. A nice specimen of the orchid. The image is quite sharp but underexposed. The background, although soft, is very busy. The image could be improved by going into Photoshop and selecting subject and adjusting the exposure. I would crop it all around to remove some of the background. An acceptance. Blue Lady. An interesting subject with lots of flair. The image is sharp with a good depth of field. Generally, the exposure is good, but there are some harsh shadows on the face that are simple to correct in Photoshop. When taking full-length portraits, make sure the feet, or in this case, the bottom of the dress are included. If not, crop to a point that shows that you intended to crop and not just missed it, say halfway up the skirt. I would also crop the right-hand side to just past the first red post. This focuses the eye on the person. An acceptance. Cassowary, Eddy Bay, Queensland. A good clean image that has been well composed with a good depth of field. The background is soft and muted. Having said it is a nice image, why do we need to have a horizontal image? Why not a vertical and include his legs and feet? If that is not practical, why not crop half the body on the left, the two stumps of legs and most of the right-hand side and have a lovely head portrait? An acceptance. Central Park through the window. The author has made a feature of the unusual window frame. There is a wide range of lighting on the different subjects. The near silhouette of the window frame works well. I would treat the outside world to a lightening of the shadows and a darkening of the highlights. This would bring out more detail. An acceptance. Drops on a web. A difficult subject compounded by using a macro lens. There is a beautiful, well-exposed background that sets off the geometric shapes. There is a problem with the focus and depth of field. There is a small problem as I see a dust spot on the sensor. And acceptance. Hippie Elvers. A good attempt at a still life image. When doing a still life, you can control all aspects of lighting, focus and placement. The exposure is quite good, but I have an issue with flat front lighting. The background is distracting and tends to take the viewer's attention away from the main subject. The corner of the doily needs to have a space between itself and the edge of the frame. And acceptance. In amongst the bottle brush. This is a nice image of the wattlebird, but the bottle brush is somewhat overwhelming. If this were my image, I would place it in Photoshop and use the rotate canvas 90-degree counterclockwise. This would remove the barrier of the flowers and turn them into a perch as well as a strong leading line. The rest of the image then becomes a manageable background. And acceptance. Lake Bonnie sunset. A nice, well-exposed image with delicate, soft pastel colours. The trees and foreground show adequate detail and there is a nice reflection of the cloud. But I feel that the use of a portrait format does not do justice to the scene and the whole story has not been told. And acceptance. Mount Roland. A picturesque scene that has been slightly overexposed. The detail is good, as is the depth of field. The mountain story is cut short and overwhelmed by the foreground fence. This fence creates a leading line, but it also keeps the eye moving into the rest of the picture. And acceptance. Mum, I didn't touch him. It is a nice portrait of the front animal with good exposure and lots of fine detail. There is a problem with the depth of field as the other two animals are soft. The image, as is, needs the left-hand side cropped close to the animals' backs. Personally, I would forget the two rear animals and crop in close all around to the animal in front. And acceptance. Ocean beach sunset. A quite low-key image with soft pastel colours. The author has handled the bright sunlight well. The depth of field is good and the horizon is straight. The story of the image is the two figures looking at the bird, and I would crop the left-hand side to focus on the story. If the large expanse of sand had been the other side of the figures and in the direction they were looking, it would have made a better story. And acceptance. Ready for work. I find this image very busy with no real point of focus, and the ship on the left halts the eye travelling into the image. I feel there is a problem with the white balance as there is a blue cast. If this were my image, I would crop the last crane on the right and then flip the image horizontally. This would make the wharf a good leading line. And acceptance. Row, row, row the boat. This image has been generally well exposed, but there has been some blowout in the highlights. The image is sharp and has a good depth of field. The problem is that there is so much negative space between the boat and the shore. The story is the boat, and most of the rest of the image needs to be cropped. And acceptance. Sharing a moment. The image has strong colours which attract the viewer's attention. The image does have a good story about the interaction between the two people. Overall, the exposure is good. However, the white top on the girl has lost detail due to the strong light. The end processing could have been better, as the black on the left side has bled into the reds. The black patch on the steps draws the eye away from the people. This could have been easily turned into the same red as the steps, and the rod in the centre of the black patch made to point in the same direction as the others. And acceptance. Some orange berries. The concept and execution of this image is quite good. The exposure and depth of field are good, but the background, even as seen through the bottle, gives the impression of high digital noise. And acceptance. The selfie. A colourful image on what appears to be a wet, dull day. The image is well exposed with a good depth of field. The image is flat, especially in the background. This could be eased by reducing the shadows and increasing the highlights. And acceptance. A vanishing fall. A nice well-exposed image with a good depth of field. The author's focus is on the falls, therefore the large amount of green either side of the falls should be cropped. It does not matter if the image is square or rectangular. By cropping the image, the viewer's eye is focused on the main subject. Highly commended. Clavalinopsis sulcata. The unusual fungi have been quite well exposed. I have a query about the white balance as the greens are an unusual colour. I would like to see the highlights reduced while the shadows lightened. I would crop the top down to the top of the green bush, and I would reduce the bottom coloured leaves by half. Highly commended. Conversation. A nice well-exposed image that has two sharp figures in the foreground. When composing an image, consider distractions. On the left, there is a shaft of white light with an arm poking out. We don't need, so crop. On the right, there is a bright green doorway that is not needed, so crop. Finally, at the bottom, don't crop off the feet. Highly commended. Guinea fowl. A nice clean image that has been well captured. The detail is sharp, the focus is good, and the eye is clear and focused. The depth of field has given a soft background. The one thing that is lacking with this image is a good story, and today story is becoming more important in all spheres of photography. Highly commended. Nelson Falls. Quite the iconic image. The image is sharp throughout, and the water in the falls has been well exposed. The surrounding bushland and creek are underexposed. An easy fix would be to use a radial gradient in Adobe Camera Raw in the centre of the waterfall and make a vertical oval to cover the falls and the river and reduce the exposure to near the rest of the image. Next, go to the general exposure and increase. The end effect will give a well-exposed image with the light coming from the left, but still has nice shadows on the right. Highly commended. Pulleys. A well-executed study in textures. The detail is good, but the leading lines are in conflict with the line of the pulley, taking the eye into the frame only to be halted by the wire. I feel the image is a little underexposed and the dark areas and the shadow under the horizontal wooden beam could be lightened to bring out some detail. Highly commended. Reindeer Lodge. This image has been well exposed with good depth of field, but I feel you have lost the lodge in all the surroundings. Correcting is just a matter of deciding what to keep and what to throw away. I would crop about half the bush on the right, most of the timber on the bottom, and the sky to just above the tree in the centre. Try this and see if you think it's a stronger image. Highly commended. Rue. A very nice portrait of an eastern grey. It has excellent sharp detail in the fur, which is emphasised by the strong backlighting. The eyes are in focus and the image has been well cropped. The depth of field is good and the background is soft and unobtrusive. The image has been underexposed and the shadows need lightening. Highly commended. Steampunk 1. A very colourful portrait that has been well captured. It is sharp with a good background and has been well cropped. The image needs a little work done in the post-processing where the exposure needs a slight increase, but this has to be compensated for by reducing the highlights. The main areas of concern are the shadow areas of the face. Highly commended. Sunflowers for sun lovers. A very colourful display that has been well exposed and sharp and has a good depth of field. When you look at an image, are there parts of the image that do not add to the story? The image does not have to have a standard format. This image needs to be cropped on all four sides and you will end up with a square image that is totally focused on the flowers. Highly commended. West Tamar Bridge. A nicely exposed image at the end of the day. The depth of field is good. The bridge has been shot hoping for a good leading line. However, the huge pylon on the left takes the eye and holds it. I would crop it to the junction of the bottom and the first vertical line. It is always wise to consider things like the dark pylons and the rocks on the shore and work to bring out some detail. Finally, I would flip the canvas horizontally, This would put the big pylon as a barrier, stopping the eye from moving out of the frame. Highly commended. Winter picnic in Central Park, New York City. A sharp and well-exposed image with nice lighting. The depth of field is good with a good story. To me, the image is top-heavy with too much foliage. You could crop this by at least a third and still convey the same story. Optional would be to crop some off the right. Highly commended. Blue Hour, Melbourne. A very nice image that takes advantage of the blue light that is seen just before dark. The image is well exposed with a good depth of field, and there are no blowouts with the lights. The image has been well cropped. A merit. Creek Crossing, Parachilna Gorge, South Australia. A beautiful, well-exposed image of a typical outback scene. The depth of field is good and it has been well cropped. The image just needs to gain a little sparkle as it seems a little flat. This can be easily fixed in Photoshop by reducing the highlights and lightening the shadows and darkening the blacks. A merit. Crested tern. An excellent image of a crested tern. The eye is perfectly sharp and there is very good depth of field leading to a soft muted background. The difficulty of capture is enhanced by the bird flying towards you. The image is top heavy and needs the top cropped. A little also should be taken from the left to enhance and focus the subject within the frame. This would create a panoramic format. A merit. Dawn Fight. A striking image that uses the foreground silhouette to good effect. The exposure is excellent with no blown out areas in the highlights. There is, however, what I presume is chromatic aberration around the animals. Most of this can be removed using the texture slider in Photoshop. Also, the animal on the right has the last section of its leg missing. Here, a fine black brush would fill the gaps. A merit. Flying Duck Orchid 1. A very interesting orchid with exquisite colouring. The image has a good depth of field with an excellent soft background. The image has been well cropped, but it needs a little more exposure to bring it to life. A merit. Laurie's Waterfall. A nice image with good detail throughout. The rock formation is unusual and interesting, and the slow shutter speed emphasises the fine sprays of water. I think the image feels a little flat and could do with a bit of lightening in the shadows. When editing your photos, keep an eye on the horizon, as this image is tilted to the left. A merit. Navy Avenger. A nice image with good detail throughout. The exposure and depth of field are good and the image has been well cropped. A merit. Reflections. A very nice, well-exposed image. The image has a good depth of field and has been well cropped. The colours are true and there is no sign of digital noise in the blacks. A merit. Dusky Robin. The image is well exposed with good detail throughout. The depth of field is good. The background is relatively soft, but there are some distracting highlights. As this is colour and not nature, Camera Raw will allow you to select and adjust the exposure of the background. The image can be further enhanced by cropping the left and top to totally eliminate that light coloured branch. Finally, to balance the picture, I would crop the right-hand side up to the point of intersection of the main log and the border. Honours. Fetch. A great action shot. The image has been well exposed with a good depth of field. The action has been well stopped. I would have liked some of the negative space on the right cropped, but this is only a personal preference. Honours. Grey Heron. A beautiful sharp image with good detail in the feathers and the eye is in focus. There is a good story associated with the image. The background is probably a little too sharp and bright, but overall a very nice image. Honours. Out of the Fog. An excellent portrait, well exposed, with a very unusual background that suits the subject well. There is very little that I would suggest be done, except I would use a small brush in Camera Raw and create a mask over the eyes. Using the shadow tool, bring out the details in the pupils. Honours. Special memories. The exposure has been well handled under difficult conditions. The girls have been silhouetted with backlight that gives detail around the face and hair, while the sky and sun have no sign of being blown out. Also, the horizon has been kept straight. Honours. Splash 112. A beautiful, well-captured, delicate droplet image. Everything is in sharp focus and well exposed with a good background. The only thing I noticed was a few highlights in the splash were clipped. Well caught. Honours. Whistling kite. A beautiful image with great detail in the feathers and the eye in sharp focus. The bird has space on the left to move into. As good as the image is, I feel that a little extra cropping would benefit. On the right, I would crop the small vertical branch. On the left, I would leave the same amount or even a little more sky in front as there is behind the bird. Honours.